Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto. Show me the crypto.
In a world on the brink of disruption, two men will bring you clarity by interviewing some of the most intelligent and influential names in the blockchain world. Welcome to Show Me the Crypto with your hosts, Wade Patterson and Ulf Lonergan.
Well, hi there and welcome to Show Me the Crypto. My name is Wade Patterson.
And I'm Ulf Lonergan.
We're a couple of friends from Canada who love learning about cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology, and we're happy you're along for the ride. Whether you're a crypto virgin or you know your way around the block, we hope our interviews with some of the most intelligent and influential people in the space help deliver you with value. And on this episode, we're joined by Jeff Booth, a technology entrepreneur and self-proclaimed reluctant author of The Price of Tomorrow. Jeff is passionate about looking at big problems and solving those problems through the lens of technology. Inspired by his children's future, Jeff wrote The Price of Tomorrow to deeply explore how the deflationary nature of technology is bumping up against the world we've always lived in, which requires inflation to thrive. When he's not busy attempting to solve the world's biggest problems, Jeff enjoys playing the guitar around a campfire with family and friends or skiing at one of the mountains near Vancouver. Jeff, welcome to Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're really excited to have you on and have this conversation. And I want to go back to your childhood, your upbringing. And was this fascination for technology something that you always had, or was there a particular moment where you knew your career wanted to be focused around tech?
Yeah, I would say I've always been curious. So always curious in how things work and everything else. So that probably leads naturally to, wow, there's something really here with this technology thing. So, but no, it wasn't. It wasn't always technology. So my first company really used technology to try to solve a problem. So the Build Direct was really the problem in building supplies. It costs a lot. You really couldn't understand it. Supplies wouldn't come on time. So you had to trust intermediaries to be able to deliver what you would want or what you thought you want. And then it never matched your expectations, or the cost was enormous. And so that's the problem I was trying to solve with technology through one of my first companies. So really thinking in technology is just a tool to be able to free our time.
And what about on the flip side? We're talking about a little bit of combination of both tech and then money. How did your upbringing sort of develop your thoughts around money, and what did that look like?
Well, I don't know. So everything we look at, everything we experience, we kind of question or don't question it and everything else. And we kind of into a fog. So I was fortunate. My parents were we had an incredible upbringing. I couldn't have asked for more in kind of loving family upbringing. To say we were wealthy, that would be a lot. We weren't. We were middle class, and so things happened through that event. 1981, interest rates went to 20-odd%. Everything collapsed. Our family was caught up in that as well. So we're a whole bunch of other families. But you don't really know, as an 11-year-old kid at that time, how much of these things influence you. But I would say that I've always liked to ask big questions. I'll give you an instance from my parents at our dinner table. As we were kids on Sunday nights, they would create a debate, and you'd have to take one side of the debate. And as soon as you were winning the debate, you had to take the other side of the debate. So it made you do critical thinking in a really big way. You had to, effectively you had to understand the other person's argument better than your own argument to make an argument. And it gave you, it didn't at first, early on in those types of times, you're mad. You create it, but over time, you separate, essentially separating the ego from the argument. allow critical thinking. So that probably helped a lot in asking big questions.
So did you end up in debate class in high school? You must have come in there well prepared.
I didn't, but I do. Debates are different today because debates are solved on your iPhone, and then oh well, I found this side of the debate, I found this side of the debate, and now it keeps going on an iPhone. Yeah, it used to go on for weeks, as people would go to the library or something like that to be able to try to solve it. So we called them hot tub debates.
Nice.
So I mentioned in the bio there that that you were inspired by your children to write the book, The Price of Tomorrow. But what specifically happened there? Like at what moment did you decide to start putting this down? Like what experience, what knowledge did you gain? What inspired you to really get started?
So probably by the way, and this is actually why maybe it took an entrepreneur to be able to see what was happening. And so I was frustrated by what was happening. And so what does an entrepreneur do? Quite simply, the world believes in a solution, and that creates a solution, and we all use that solution. And an entrepreneur sees a different way of life, right? And they build to, and if they're right and they create more value for other people, that new business takes over the old business, and more value is created. So let's use that as an example. I'll use an example. Research in Motion, for a long time, Canadian company, created BlackBerry. Everybody believed that cell phones needed a keyboard, and we all used the keyboard, and it was a belief in a system that created a monopoly out of research in motion. When Steve Jobs had an idea, and remember, everything we use, everything around us is just an idea first. And when enough people see that idea, people move. Remember when that idea first came out? Remember, the iPhone we use is only 15 years old. And when it first came out, most people said, security doesn't have a keyboard. Nobody's going to use this. It's junk. But that idea, as it cascades across society, changes an industry in this case. Out of that, so that's what an entrepreneur does. And that's what I was doing and am doing, and in a whole bunch of different companies. That idea, technology reduces prices and gives us way more for less, is the underpinning of the society that we're moving into. And every day, more and more and more of that is happening. And I could not understand. Remember, my first technology company, I can't remember the exact number, but it was over $5 million to create technology today, and a year and a half of work to create a huge team to create technology today that's $50 a month. And actually, wow. The technology today is way better than that. So I could not understand why globally, if technology was moving into everything and it was moving at an exponential pace into everything, why weren't prices coming down everywhere? And so I got curious about it. I got really curious about it. And the more I looked, the more I kind of went deeper and deeper onto this problem, the more I realized, oh no, oh no. We have two different systems colliding into each other, and one system must make prices go up forever. A credit-based system will fail if prices don't keep going up. And one system brings prices down. And so you could get mad at that or anything else, but you realize from a system perspective, the two things are incongruent together. And so for 10 years, I was talking about this all the time, looking deeper and deeper. And I couldn't believe that on one side, all the technologists were talking about, we're going to grow our company forever. And the monetary theorists or everything else is essentially, we're going to lower interest rates, increase debt, and then print money, all on a line to be able to essentially stop prices from falling. And I realized my kids are not going to grow up in the same world that I'm going to grow up in, or that I grew up in, not have the same opportunities. My kids will, because of my, call it privilege, luck, timing, everything. But there's a whole generation, a whole population that won't even have the access, chances, and everything else. And the world look very different than it did with me when I grew up.
You've used the analogy before about folding a piece of paper so many times to sort of compare it to the exponential rate of the expansion of technology. Can you maybe just use that analogy to sort of explain to our audience, how you've used that before?
Sure. When I grab a piece of paper, and it's easier. Just that piece of paper. If I fold it once, fold it twice, fold it 3 times, and if I could keep folding it 4 times, and if I could keep folding that 50 times, that piece of paper, I can only fold it 7. But if I could keep folding it 50 times, that piece of paper would reach from the earth to the sun. And the first time you hear it, you're blown away by that. And then you think your brain knows it. And you think, oh yeah, I understand exponential patterns. But when I explain this story, the reason I explain this isn't for a parlor trick. It's because I've asked this that question to tens of thousands, maybe now hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, and no one gets the answer. You only get the answer if you know it, or you've calculated it before, you heard it before. But most people, 99% of people, guess about 2 inches. And so on fold 4, when it's this, that's a really good analog for what's happening in technology. Because the early folds in technology, we develop what's called a hype cycle. Gartner has created a model around the Gartner hype cycle. And there's a whole bunch of people to think that technology is going to, holy cow, we're going to have Jetsons, right? and everything's going to change in an instant. And the first fold, well, that's fold 3, shows up as nothing. Mm-hmm. But in the later folds, right now we're on fold 34 going to fold 35, and it's doubling every 2 years or so in compute power. So the later folds do the opposite. They are so that hype cycle and then collapse of expectations because it didn't do what we expected. Then on the backside of that, as it keeps folding, as technology keeps doubling and doubling and doubling, on the backside of that exponential pattern, where did this come from? And today we're in the self-driving cars, artificial intelligence. We're in where did this come from? And where did this come from? We're not thinking fast enough because it's exponential. We're not thinking what's coming is going to blow people away. And so that becomes a big deal if our financial system is operating. So if it takes, and then now put these pieces together. On one side, that should be giving the world more and more for less. Prices should be coming down everywhere as labor falls out of the market. And so if that's not happening, what's stopping that from happening? And so when I wrote the book, there was 250 trillion. There's a lot more than that now. But there was $250 trillion of global debt to run an $80 trillion global economy. And you'd think, wow, can that debt ever be paid back? When you realize that if you paid back debt at $1 a second, it would take 32,000 years to pay back 1 trillion. So. Wow. So these are staggering numbers, and it almost make-believe numbers. But that's not the smoking gun. The smoking gun is 185 trillion of that 250 trillion came in the last 20 years, as you would expect it to. If technology was going one way and you had to make prices rise and you were trying to offset that gain by going the other way. And so that's what's happening. And then when people look, because they measure a system from the system, when they look at their house, they think housing always goes up without asking the question, would housing go up without $185 trillion of stimulus over the last 20 years? The answer is it wouldn't. But
and then in terms of COVID, has that just incredibly, because you mentioned 185 trillion in the last 20 years, but what percentage of that has been in the last year and a half or so with the with the various stimulus?
So no, that was before.
Mm.
That was before COVID, and now the numbers are they're grow. By the way, there's a chapter in the book that talks about this is just math. On one side, it has to exponentially increase the amount of debt, or now today monetary easing, printing, making up money, to offset the technology moving the other way. So it's growing way faster today, and it'll grow way faster tomorrow, and more faster and faster and faster. So you have two systems moving away from each other faster and faster. And think about what a business would do. So let's first think about what you would do, what every single person listening to this would do. You would vote with your time and money that you have to try to get more for less. Is that fair? Why we use Google, why we use Amazon. We say, why don't people support the local store that costs more? But we buy at Amazon, right? So we say one thing, why don't we do this? But everybody votes with their time, and they vote to get more for less. Why you use the iPhone and all the apps are free and everything else on it is because it's giving you a lot more for less. And if there was another competitor that gave way more value, you would switch in an instant. So that's how we all vote with our time. How can we do that and believe everybody else does the same thing, and concurrently say, but the system, when we roll up all those choices, must work the other way? And then you'll see the incongruence and the cognitive dissonance of that thought experiment, because in there, we believe in a system where our money must be worth less each year. We believe in inflation, and that system says, for a productive society, your money must be devalued every year, and it's a lie. And it's hard to see because we live in that system, but it is not true. It's not true, and so these systems are moving further and further away from each other. So, what would a rational actor, and in this case, a business, let's take one of my businesses, do in that case where you couldn't get labor, or prices were going higher and higher, and if you hired the labor at that, no one would buy your products? Wouldn't you use technology to remove labor even faster? Seems pretty obvious. No one making bad decisions, just making rational decisions in a system that is designed irrationally.
So what's the end game then? Where's this all going? We've got two competing forces. One that is definitely not going away, which is technology and its exponential rate. What about monetary policy and inflation? Is that just going to continue until there's some sort of, implosion on itself? How does that play out?
So these are normally reset through, if people, Fourth Turning seems to be a popular book these days. And one thing that's missing, but let's say some of the stuff that it is catching, these debt cycles, this is way more a belief system in us and human nature than a system constructed to capitalize on that than anything else. So let's say, what would you believe? And did you believe before you saw crypto and everything else? Would you rather believe that a government should spend the money that it taxes or that it makes from citizens, and there's a vote in that? Or would you rather believe they should be able to spend more and hide the extra spending and inflation? And I know what you'll answer. You'll answer they shouldn't be able to spend more and hide that inflation. But the majority of people would never vote for deflation because it would collapse the system they live in. And what they can't see from that system is that system is actually creating all of the pain in their life. But they can't see it, because if you've enriched a bunch of people by creating, so inflation, all your asset prices go up, stock prices go up, everything else. And on the other side of that, so if you have hard assets in that, they'll rise in price. And on the other side of that, inflation is wage deflation, or currency. Your currency is worth less. So wage earners and everything else are making less in real terms. And so somebody wins, somebody loses from that game that's being played, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And so what happens to, and because fewer people win, and if you have more assets, you win more. So imagine today you have BlackRock, one of the biggest funds in the world, competing with you and I to buy homes. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
But why? Of course, they're going to do that because that's trying to protect the value of money. And so the wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, and rents go up higher and higher and higher. There's a whole bunch of people that are left out of that equation. Because there's way more people left out of that equation at the bottom, they're getting crushed. Middle class and poor are getting crushed, and they can't escape it. But they can't see this conversation we're having. So what would they do? They would vote for leaders who will say, I will give you more. Missing the entire fact all along that they're giving you more by picking your other pocket. And so you vote for, so people vote for populism, and governments expand their powers. And so if you believe in a free market of ideas is what creates a thriving economy. As entrepreneurs create new things that we value. And as you do more and more of that concentration of control in government, you remove the free market. So two things out of that. You've put very small people in control of everything. Individual rights and freedoms move away as you concentrate power in government. Look at Russia, look at China, look at that, what ends up happening in that. And living standards must go down because a small number of people could never compete with the free market of all of our minds trying to drive more value. So when you direct that money, a lot of that money is just wasted and it's removed from a productive economy. So where does it go? On the existing system, it keeps concentrating more and more power in government. And then you have revolutions and wars, because the only way to be able to keep power at that is to blame somebody else for the problem. And so people are caught out here blaming other people from a system problem. And then after you've essentially created your power and base in your own country, you need to create a bigger war to manipulate your population. And then it turns into a geopolitical hot war is essentially what's happening.
Ulf, do you realize our audience has been either watching or listening to this episode for 20 minutes?
20 minutes? No, they should probably subscribe.
Yeah, they should subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment and turn on notifications. And if you're listening to this podcast, especially if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and a review.
We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. So go check out the episode description. You can find all that information below. And we have an update on the NFT, don't we?
That's right. We didn't previously mention this, but this NFT for OG supporter is a one of one. There will only be one of this kind ever minted, and we have a few surprises for the person who purchases it. The link is in the episode description.
And back to the episode. So is that the inevitable? That's where we're going, in your opinion?
So I wish that wasn't true. And why I do these podcasts, why I wrote the book, is not for money. I don't need the money, don't need anything else. It's to avoid that conclusion. Why I've come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is the solution, and I don't say that lightly, is I've looked at every single thing I could, and I don't see another solution that could avoid that outcome. And because let's just imagine a government today, and so forget bad people or anything else. A lot of people will bite on that, and they make it worse, or they make Bitcoin a scary place to go because it turns into a fight. So if governments allow the free market to work, so allow prices to decline, then what ends up happening is that all of the debt that's against the asset prices, so the asset prices would fall. And all of the debt that's sitting there, because it's just a credit-based economy, would keep unwinding. And so it would unwind and unwind and unwind. And the money that people think they have in their bank that's offset by somebody else's debt isn't there. And so if they allow prices to fall, you have a cascading collapse across society. And people think they get the cause of that wrong. And then they get scared of deflation. So deflation is just when your money is worth more each year because goods and services are you're getting more value. So, but they miss debt deflation, and that fixing of a system that is unstable, it is caused by a run up of debt that can't be paid back, and as a system so that unwind in some sort of capacity has to happen. What governments are doing to try to kick the can down the road is unwind by making your currency worth less, right? So trying in real terms, if you own currency and they get away with it, you lose more and more value. And we're so far close, we're so deep into that cycle now. If you think about, I just read this the other day, what snowflake causes the avalanche? And people always look at and the avalanche is caused from a buildup of debt, and the snowpack becomes unstable, right? Which snowflake caused it? The last one? It's almost irresponsible to ask which snowflake caused it. We wouldn't even think like that. Mm-hmm. So which amount of printing or what is going to cause the cascading collapse in society? So that's kind of where we are in this cycle. You can avoid it if you can convince your citizens that they should transfer all of their power to you as a government to be able to control money, which is and if you believe that somebody should be able to press a button and make 40 years of your work worthless, then that's what you should believe. Then that's what you're believing. But you're believing in the power of a small group of people with domain over everybody else. And so that is where it goes. And Bitcoin is a parallel solution that's growing in a network faster and faster and faster and faster, that if enough people understand what it is, then you could make, it's not going to be orderly, but you could make a more orderly transition from one system to another system.
Taking a step back, in terms of when you first discovered this concept of Bitcoin, like at what point did you become aware of it, and right away it clicked to you as an aha moment? Like, did you understand that it could be a solution, or were you skeptical at first? Like, what was the context of you learning about Bitcoin?
So as a technology CEO founder, I had it early on when the Bitcoin white paper came out, and I had some of my developers getting involved in it and trying to convince me this is a big deal. And I didn't pay attention. And the reason why I didn't pay attention, I was too busy on my business. I didn't even think about it and everything else. And then again, and you're watching it and everything else, but I didn't really investigate at the level that it takes that critical thought to. It wasn't actually until 2017 I started accumulating. But I would say even until I wrote the book, until I got the pieces down in the book, I didn't come to a solution that because I was trying to think, again, that debate thing I said earlier. I was trying to think, what possible solution out of all possible solutions? I know the existing system cannot survive without concentrating of all control and war. So what possible solution is it? And I didn't want to close my brain to possible solutions. So I investigated to the sand on a whole bunch of different solutions, and then came to the conclusion, I don't see another one, at least for me. Maybe there is, maybe I'm wrong. But I've done a lot of work in this space, and I don't see another solution.
One of the biggest reasons, I think people who have been in the crypto space for a little bit, they come around to understanding all of the value of Bitcoin and just this technology and what it means. But if we're being honest, a lot of people, that's not their initial reason for getting in. They perhaps heard of somebody who made a lot of money through cryptocurrency, or it's maybe not the most of I don't know the word here, but impressive reasons for getting in that sense. Do you think that that's just a necessary gateway drug for people to get in and then they come to their own understanding? Or is there any danger of people getting into Bitcoin for that reason of they want to increase their wealth and maybe thinking in fiat terms like, oh, I'm going to put money in Bitcoin and then I'm going to take it back out in fiat at a higher value?
So it's part of the design and the game mechanics of Bitcoin, and it's an important part of the design. Because every time that cycle happens, more and more people are exposed to the why behind it. And so, it's that volatility and upward volatility is a key feature today of Bitcoin that brings more people, and more people are talking about it all the time. And so I don't really care. Everybody has their own reason. What you'll find with a whole bunch of people that are deeper into this and really understand the financial system we're in, and the almost the fake reality we're in, and where that takes us versus what it could look like. That path, a lot of people kind of move through Bitcoin into a different place. They can care less about the price. They're in it for the system change. And some of this stuff, if it's the first time some of your audience has heard it, they'll react to what I'm about to say they will push what I'm about to say away, because it mismatches all of their models in their brain. And so I actually think Bitcoin might be the only thing that actually can save humanity. If we fight a hot war with nuclear weapons and where technology is taking us today, and people start pressing the buttons, it won't look like the wars of Rome or World War I or World War II. It'll look very different. And we know the existing system must take us there. And we know people will vote for that existing system. And so this idea of an alternative system that makes that transition easier is important.
When it comes to this alternative system to Bitcoin, so let's say, the greater population decides to adopt it under whatever influences or by choice, and it does grow in popularity. What about the people who do have the power, that small group you talk about, the governments? Will they push back, or is there, will they see the value and want to participate? How do you see that playing out?
And again, remember, these are not one. It's easy to say this is going to happen. We're playing a probability game across space and time. So what is likely to happen? And every country will play that game as well, because their incentives will be different than our incentives and everything else. So, but as what I think is likely to happen is one system must essentially lie to be able to. It must keep on printing money, and as a result, you have misinformation and money. All money is an arbitrary concept of your time. You actually don't want more money. You want more time to enjoy the things that you want to do. But we miss that because we think we lock in on the money being the thing that gives us the time. So it's an arbitrary concept of our time. And when people destroy our money, they actually destroy our time as a byproduct. So that system must keep doing that. And a lot of people will be fooled and believe in that system and everything else. But as it does it, there's more conversation about what Bitcoin is, and more people are starting to gain awareness. And so you have Bitcoin accelerating on a network effect, faster and faster and faster, and bringing more value to users all the time. If you looked at Bitcoin, the usability of Bitcoin, what it looked like 5 years ago, it was really hard. UX was hard. There wasn't multi-sig. There wasn't Lightning. There wasn't these things that today, this whole ecosystem is thriving. And in our brains, we, just like that exponential pattern, we project our current reality forward, and we miss how much changes as a result of those changes. So so instead of projecting what technology is going to look like, we project what it looks like now forward. And that's a big deal for how fast Bitcoin, the ecosystem is growing so fast. I think it's unstoppable now. Or I hope it's unstoppable now, because it allows humanity to transition. But I would say everybody should get off zero. They should have an allocation in Bitcoin.
We've been talking a lot about Bitcoin and how the technology behind it, blockchain technology and Bitcoin itself, will revolutionize our future, and how it's the solution to arguably one of the largest problems we're facing as we move into our future. What about crypto as a whole and some of the newer projects and other blockchains that are being developed and that are exist today? Ethereum, for example. What are your thoughts on some of these other blockchains? And the propositions that come with those, for example, scalability, lower transaction fees, things that maybe they challenge against Bitcoin today.
So let's take that on from a kind of business point of view, or anything else. Now, number one, that if you believe in a centralized network, so a bunch of people if they've done a pre-mine, and there's 70% of the pre-mine is the founders, then that looks a lot like our existing financial system. And you control the network by who controls it. So I am categorically against a bunch of those. Not that they can't build a ton of wealth for founders or a ton of wealth for people that get in and get out. So it's not a matter. I'm not against them people can make any financial decision they want. I like gambling at Vegas, right? So, but it's a different thing than when I'm gambling in Vegas than when I'm putting something behind something I have conviction in forever. And so when I think about that, I believe that to make this transition, and an open decentralized monetary network is a critical step, and to stop what would happen from governments who would give up the right to be able to create extra revenue with nobody seeing it. Who would give up the right for government to say, I'm going to go in and steal from everybody's homes at 2% a year or 3% or 4% a year so I can expand my powers? Because that's really what it is. Inflation is theft. So government won't give up that right easily. And there has to be a network that protects that right. And that needs to be an open, decentralized monetary network to be able to remove that forever from somebody being able to manipulate people with money. The only thing I've seen to be able to do that is two things. There's other projects, but government would shut it down before they saw the light of day. Bitcoin, it was evolved in a unique time and space that most governments didn't see what it was until too late. So now it's far enough along, and it's that monetary network it's expanding and expanding and expanding. And if you think about the transaction limit or the 10-minute window and everything else, and let's go there first. It's optimized for security. It's optimized for decentralization, and it's optimized for security. So there's a whole bunch of crypto projects that are optimized for something different. But this is optimized, the way that the protocol is designed is optimized that nobody could take it from you or nobody. So it just, that hashing power is proof of work is a feature, not a bug, because it's optimized for security. It becomes the best asset, I believe, on the planet, because it's an asset that is outside the domain. If you can remember 10 words, 12 words, then you can take it with you anywhere in the world. Nothing can change that. It's decentralized. If you own 1 million Bitcoin, you don't control the network. You have more wealth, but you have no extra power or influence on the network. I think that's a really important thing. Now, then, if I look at Ethereum specifically, because Bitcoin did that job, and it was optimized for that job, and so there was an opening. If you're wanting to create kind of when Ethereum started, a global computer with smart contracts. That's why it started. There was an opening because Bitcoin couldn't do that job because it needed faster transaction times and everything else to sell crypto kitties, NFTs, everything else. Bitcoin couldn't do that job. And there's a hole was in the market for a different job that Ethereum did. And actually a lot of people use it for that today. And then another hole as Ethereum's gas fees go up. Other coins say, "Oh, I could do that too." They're kind of mini Ethereums, and it keeps on moving, and it keeps on moving down. So now what ends up is, Bitcoin optimized for kind of that primary gold, digital gold, effectively. It couldn't be a decentralized digital gold, but it couldn't really be used as a currency because transaction times were too slow. And so now Lightning on top of that solves that problem. So what is happening if you look at the growth of the Lightning network, how fast that's growing, it builds on top of Bitcoin and does a lot of the things that Ethereum did before Lightning Network was available, and it's expanding and expanding. So the question I think in the future is, do you believe that the monetary network, the Bitcoin is the digital gold, and then you're going to use, or money, then you're going to use something else as money to transact in, or will the technology be built on top of Bitcoin and reinforce the network? I believe what I said at the latter. I believe the technology will be built on top of the network and reinforce the network. And you have two network effects feeding back on each other. And you'll get this velocity of two different use cases on Bitcoin. But there are some people that believe Ethereum will do it. And Ethereum's new London fork, I think it actually effectively says what I just said. Because what it's saying is, we're going to lose the race because people are going to, why would they use Ethereum when Lightning is available? So now we need to win the race. Now we need to win the race we need to compete with Bitcoin as a store of value. Right? So I think that's actually what it is. And I don't think Ethereum is going to compete with Bitcoin as a store of value.
We've had some interesting chats with some of our guests. And I think that, when we're projecting out into the future as to how everything could play out. So rarely have we had anyone argue that Bitcoin is here to stay and that Bitcoin is digital gold and that it will sort of represent maybe, a primary currency or value that will be looked at when maybe comparing it to other crypto assets. But going into that future, there's the point of view that you were just describing, which is sort of like, which technology will we use? Will Bitcoin build on top of itself and build better solutions, and it's all within one network? But the other, or one other primary way to look at this is, what about a world where all these different blockchain technologies become interoperable at some point, and we can just use the specific benefits and features from different chains that all work together and build on top of each other that way, so that when you talk about this one network, well, maybe at a certain point in the future, different blockchains interoperating is then looked at as still one network. It's now a network of networks, and that's perhaps one way that it will go. What are your thoughts on that?
Potential. What I would say is, look at how many crypto projects or blockchains and everything else are being launched every day, and that confusion. You typically have to have, I think about this through a business lens, and I think about this through technology business lens. And I see probably 300 to 400 investment opportunities, or people ask me to join their boards per year. So it's a staggering number of things I see, and you develop a pattern recognition for what works, what doesn't work. Not always right. Teams, technology, wrong time, but you develop a pretty good idea and everything else. And one of the key concepts of that is even to have a chance, the new company needs to have 10 times better value than what they're replacing. And I think, and if you think about that 10x, in some way or form, 10x value, because what ends up happening in these companies is somebody sitting in a room and saying, my thing is the best, and not realizing what the competitor is going to do to your thing. Totally miss it. There's just somebody else in another room saying, right, and ready for that. And so if you don't have a 10 times advantage and the market isn't moving to you like at a crazy rate, then you have to spend money advertising to be able to convince the market that your thing is best. So you get a whole bunch of hand waving. My thing's better. And if you looked in the crypto space today, that's what you would see, right? You'd have a whole bunch, and people can't consume that knowledge around all of these different things. I might be wrong that there is something out there that is a use case that's 10 times over something else and can create a use case. But if there isn't that type of advantage, then things consolidate and they reinforce. And the winner, because the winner has more people on the platform and more growth on the platform, the winner keeps on growing. And then it becomes harder and harder to be able to overtake that winner, and that's actually why I say that market force of everybody being there and transacting. I don't think Bitcoin's going away as a store of value. The amount of insurance companies, the amount of the people that are using this, to me, it's already won the store of value race. And now with Lightning, we'll see. It's early because it wasn't there before. I think that what that's doing, but if you look at El Salvador and people using it and the rate of growth of what that Lightning network is, I think that takes away a whole bunch of the need of these other these other cryptos. Now, that being said, I am open to the fact that I could be wrong, and there's something out there that has a network effect that comes out of nowhere, and but not a marketing network effect. Not I create a token because I own 70% of it, and I give a whole bunch away to free so people to use it to be able to create more people marketing my thing to be able to sell to others. Not that. Something that every single user, a network effect is every user is creating more value for every other user.
It's refreshing, to be honest. The last bunch of guests that we've had are very Ethereum focused, so it's nice to have this point of view and this conversation. Since we're all in Canada, I want to kind of focus just a couple of questions around the difference maybe in Canada and the States, because on crypto Twitter, for example, especially over the last year, people talking about, I think it's something like 40% of the money supply in the States was printed within the last year and a half. I don't know if that's completely accurate. I'm curious how Canada compares to that. I mean, is our situation as dire as it is in the States, or how do the two countries compare?
Canada's worse. Wow. It's in a lot worse shape from a debt to GDP standpoint, and what's happening. And we don't have the reserve currency as well. One thing we do have, though, is the more printing that happens, asset prices rise in response, and Canada's natural resources go up in value to match the printing. So that does give us some sort of offset. But you could look at this whole thing and actually, by the way, this is actually an interesting way to look at it again through a business lens. Who were the first users? So think about Amazon in the early days, and and Walmart, chief competitor, Sears, everything else. And there were a whole bunch of things on the shelf at Walmart, and manufacturers and suppliers on the shelf at Walmart and Sears and the works. Do you think that those were the first manufacturers and suppliers that went onto Amazon? Or was it the people that didn't have shelf space?
People who didn't, I would imagine.
And it's pretty obvious. It's the people that didn't have that access. And that long tail, there's way more people who were blocked by the system that wanted access to the system. And those people raced onto Amazon, which created a cascade. And more people had to do it as Amazon grew in power. Then the last remaining people, like everybody else, go really late. And that makes a ton of sense because through privilege, through access, through their monopoly power in the previous world, when there was no access, they control what you see. And you don't see anything else. So you make choices on what you see, and they think they're the smartest people in the world because your choices, you only see a certain amount. And Amazon changes that world. Google, the same thing. I remember in early in my business, even Yahoo, we had to commit to $5,000 a month in advertising on Yahoo. On TV, you'd have to commit to hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and radio, same, and everything else. But we didn't have money to be able to build to some of these. Google, we could build to for free and have access. So what happened? Us and millions of other companies built to Google because it was free advertising. And more people there, then they put PPC on top and they complete it. So what that's a story to say is people believe that the system always looks the same way because the system always looks the same way, right? And the people that control the system are enriched by the system and they have no reason to change. But when a different system emerges, who moves first? And so now you think about what's happening in Bitcoin and let's say El Salvador and Bitcoin. It's pretty obvious that El Salvador would move before Canada because we're the Nike on the old system. El Salvador had no access to the old system. It's a totally different system. So they're massive benefit. Now think about how many countries in the world look like that compared to the G30, and you'll see what's happening on this network, and it's moving faster and faster and faster. So it's just pretty obvious that the people, an open monetary network that's open to everybody, the people who will go first are the people that are most crushed by the old system.
So that's a really interesting point that, I admittedly, I'm not totally sure of what the transaction costs are at this point utilizing Lightning, but is speed and transaction costs in those countries where you look at the cost in a US dollar standpoint for transactions on Bitcoin and for someone, even Ethereum, and for people who their dollars, their native fiat currency is worth so little because it's being inflated so much. Is that even a viable solution right now? And is that not, to your point about those nations adopting this technology first, is that not a potential hole for other competitor blockchains to say, well, what if we can capitalize this on this, or is that just a non-issue because
so you have to have a network that is big enough to be able to capitalize on that. And what you're finding is, and why did El Salvador pick Bitcoin? Why did they pick Lightning Network? Is you have something that people believe is a store of value, reinforces itself on a store of value, and then a technology that's like to on those transaction costs on Lightning, it's like 0.0003 cents.
Right.
And so it's instantaneous. 70% of the population is unbanked. And so even on Bitcoin, if I actually would have thought that beforehand, it shows even myself knowing technology and everything else, I would have missed El Salvador using using Bitcoin as a payment medium, because I wouldn't have thought that was possible yet, or likely yet, because of the upward volatility in price. And so people wouldn't use it with that change in price. But that presupposes my environment. It doesn't presuppose what it looks like in El Salvador, and you have a 10x value increase, even with the price moving around, because 70% of the population is unbanked, and they have to go to Western Union, get mugged by a gang to be able to convert money and take 30% haircut. So now when you have a decentralized open network that anybody can plug into, it catches on like wildfire. You're seeing the same thing happening in Nigeria. It's not a currency yet, but the peer-to-peer network, in a whole bunch of other countries, it's growing extraordinarily fast, and reinforcing itself all the time. So each new country makes it more popular for others.
It is so fascinating hearing about other country situations. And you're right, because we're so focused sometimes on where we're living. One of our guests that we had a few months ago was talking about when she lived in Argentina and double-digit inflation being a regular thing, and the fact that they couldn't convert. Everyone would typically convert their paychecks into US dollars. The prime minister or the president stopped that. And so now, well, that's a perfect gateway to crypto and the use case to get away from that situation. I know that you had the chance talking about here in Canada to speak to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Finance. And I think it was in advance of the 2021 budget. That process, does it feel like when you have that opportunity that you are making headway in that conversation, that our elected officials are understanding the issue? Or I'll give one example. I think you were asked a question and you had 1 minute to respond or something. Like, is the opportunity that you had, did you feel like the message was received on that end?
No. The simple answer is no, but it's breaking through in a whole bunch of different ways. So each time this conversation is had, now be a bunch of politicians in this. And so I was in the waiting room and everything else. You see all the other speakers, speaker after speaker after speaker is this. My business, my whole community, my city is going to collapse unless I get this money because of X, Y, Z, over and over and over. And some of these stories, like their heartstrings and everything else, and you realize that over and over, that's what they see every day. And it's easier to say yes, not knowing that I have to press the button over here to make that happen. They honestly don't know how the system is all connected. It's easier to say yes than say no. And then I come in with this radical idea that technology is making everything cheaper. Why don't we let it? And the system we've created is the problem. And so that's a really hard grasp and to be able to do in that amount of time. But I'm going to go down a rabbit hole in a different way here.
I love it.
But if you think everything you experience, every single thing you experience is actually just an idea in somebody's head. From your products, it's just information and their ideas that if enough people believe in those ideas, they become true. And that's true for every product you experience. It's true for every service you experience. And it's true for the system you live in. Fair?
Yeah.
And now think about how each of us is wired. And we all have different abilities, largely controlled, and those abilities are largely controlled by our own belief system. And so you can see different people that, how are they having so much success in their families? How much are they having so much success in business? How much are they having so much success in all of this? Largely, that is a belief system that is encoded, that they actually see different opportunities. They see the world different than somebody else. Fair? Mm-hmm. So we create our own reality. And in turn, that cascades. If that reality is right, it cascades across society, and other people create a shared reality. And I could go as deep as we wanted onto this, but we actually live in a quantum world, where if you looked in quantum, space-time kind of falls apart, and a wave function can be in two places at the same time. but it's the observer that creates the reality. And I actually think that is actually what happens in our brain first in us as we create our own reality. And if it cascades across enough people, things change. And that's what's happening today. And what you're seeing is we live in a shared reality where we believe in inflation. It must be there. And there's a bunch of people that believe that. And while they believe that, it will happen and it'll take us on a course. And then as that's happening, there's a whole bunch of people starting to believe in potentially a new shared reality, something that looks radically different than all our models are predicting over here. And the more people that start to believe that, it starts to become true. No different than a whole bunch of people believed in the BlackBerry or Blockbuster, and technology changed the rules and allowed a different belief system to happen. But that's what's happening at a global macro economic level. And what that means is a really exciting time to be alive, but it's also being on the wrong side of that has some could have a lot of pain too.
It is an exciting time, and I think the that vision that a group of people that is now a large group of people are starting to see and come together and create, it's super exciting. But something that I often wonder is how easily can it all fall apart? Is it a house of cards in a sense? And I don't mean like the technology or something like that, and the technology sound, but is it possible that if, let's say, governments band together and they all said, you can't use Bitcoin, it's illegal, or something like that, will the cards come crashing down if the network itself, the people who have this vision, get manipulated to change that vision and no longer believe it? If enough people fall off, will it?
Yeah. So two really important things on that. I want to believe, and I'll do everything I can to increase the probabilities of Bitcoin because of that belief system and how it changes a whole bunch of things. And when I say changes a whole bunch of things, it changes a whole bunch of things for the better. People can't see it for a lot better. Our time is essentially a world in which we're moving to requires a digitally native currency that allows for deflation. That governments will not allow that to happen means then if it doesn't, it's concentration of all control in government. So that's where we're moving. So now into what is likely to happen. Yes, governments will try to shut it down, but they've tried already. They've tried in a whole bunch of countries. And every time they try to shut it down, it moves faster. Because what they're saying by doing that is they're screaming at you why you need it. They might as well take a blowhorn and say, you better get some as fast as you can because you're going to be part of our system and we're going to manipulate it. And so the more and more that happens, and if you look at what happened in India, if you look at what happened in Pakistan, if you look at what happens in all of these countries where government tries to shut it down, it actually accelerates the progress. And if you think about when in history has a technology that's empowered people ever been stopped? And what you find is let's even use Napster, right? Or video streaming and everything else. What ended up happening is government control, regulation, and everything else. They tried to stop it, and it accelerated everywhere. And in a lot of parts of the world, it's still accelerating. And what Apple did is and realized, wait, people don't want to actually cheat a system. They'll pay a small amount. They'll pay 99 cents for a song to feel like they're not cheating a system. They just don't want to pay $19.99 for a whole album, and they only want one song. So by understanding human nature, that people actually don't want to cheat, they co-opted artists to create a music platform in iTunes that solved that need differently and used the same technology effectively to be able to capitalize on a business requirement. But the technology itself, if governments just said, we're stopping it, good luck, right? It's because that people using it, and everybody says, so what you think you'll do and what you do are two different things. When price is really high and there's a technology that makes your life better, you use it. So those things are very hard. Those things are very hard to stop. And this is a technology that does that. And the more governments that try to stop it, the more people realize why they need it.
Jeff, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We're almost at our final segment, but before, I want to ask you one more question, because it's my understanding you read approximately 50 books per year. And since we're recording this in August, I'm going to assume that you've read at least 25 books so far in 2021. So what is the best book you've read so far this year, and why?
Oh, God. Preston, I'll forget the name, Preston Pitch. I always get asked this question, and I'll do something. Name 5 white things, and your brain, because you're so big enough now, will name 5 white things in your fridge, and you can immediately get the 5 white things in your fridge: eggs, milk, everything else. But you can't get it when you ask a big question. That's how I feel when everybody asks me how many books I read, because I read too many books. And so, let me just. Consciousness and the Brain.
Consciousness and the Brain.
Consciousness and the Brain by Stanislas Dehaene. It's just a really interesting look at how we think and how we develop consciousness in the brain with neuroscience and everything else. And from there, you could kind of say where quantum is moving, and so it's interesting.
Awesome. Well, like I said, we like to end every interview of Show Me the Crypto with the same 3-question segment we ask every guest. We call it You Had Me at Crypto. I'm just going to ask you those questions.
All right, Jeff. The first question, who's your favorite person to follow in the crypto space?
I'm going to say Preston.
Preston? Awesome. All right. Second question. What will the price of Bitcoin be 10 years from now?
In the millions.
Wow.
Higher than average. I like it.
Yeah. All right. And question 3. What is the most underrated coin or project in crypto?
Can't answer because I'm actually only in Bitcoin, but
Bitcoin's a fair answer. Bitcoin's a fair answer.
Oh yeah, okay. So I think it's underrated because of Lightning Network. I think of what happens. People are seeing it through one lens and thinking it can't do all these other things, and missing how fast the ecosystem is building.
Nice.
Awesome. Like I said, Jeff, such a great conversation. I learned a ton sitting here chatting to you.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Show Me the Crypto.
Thanks, guys. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for listening to Show Me the Crypto. Please make sure to subscribe as well as rate and review this podcast.